This is another in the series of leadership training videos made by the AMC New Hampshire paddlers. This video we're going to talk about trip planning, and we're going to focus on trips that are only 1 day long or less than that. The material that I'm going to use is coming from the AMC Leader Handbook and also material from our paddling leaders. On your first several trips as a leader, I would strongly suggest that you go where you know. You keep it as simple as you can. And to that end, I suggest you pick a trip that someone else has run before, that you've been on. Ask to reuse their material, their write-up, and their posting. Ask other leaders to come on your trip. Find someone that can be your co-leader. The AMC Leader Handbook on pages 23 to 26 have a lot of good information and links to help you plan trips. They have a flowchart which has a lot of information, probably more than you really need, and a lot of this is geared towards hiking more than paddling. But in the slides that follow, I'll be specific about paddling. If I just look at the upper part of this, the planning part, there's a number of different things that you might want to consider. We're going to go into a little bit of detail on some of these. You may want to pause the video for the next couple slides to see the list in more detail. So some things you want to think about is how long is the trip going to be in distance, what difficulty is the trip, what hazards are there some alternatives, what fitness level is needed for the people that are going to be on this trip. There are plenty of other things to consider as well, but oftentimes on a lot of our trips, many of these things don't really need to be considered in much detail, especially on the first kinds of trips that you're going to be leading. So one of the things that is important to consider is bathrooms, because many of our trips are in areas where there's houses around, there's not much privacy, so it may be as simple as you just tell the people that are signing up for your trips they need to stop somewhere and go to the bathroom, because there aren't going to be bathrooms at the put-in or at the takeout. If you're going on a trip that is in the ocean or tidal, you may need to be considering currents, tides, waves, ships, storms offshore, fog, power boats. Power boats can also be a consideration on a paddling trip if you're on a larger lake, or even on a river that may have powerboat access to it. Are people going to sign up for partners, meaning that they may not have a partner but they want to paddle a tandem boat? Are you going to be responsible for that? You don't have to be. Are you going to handle boat rentals? We'll talk more about that in a minute. As people are signing up, you want to look at the strength that you're getting on that trip, and consider whether you need to recruit other people to help, or simply tell some people they're not going to be able to go on that trip. We'll talk more about screening in a later video. A co-leader is not required, but I would strongly encourage you to have a co-leader on your first several trips, and it's good to have them on any trip, really. This is right out of the AMC Leader Handbook. Write a short description that you're going to use for marketing, both on your database and on Facebook and Meetup if you choose to post them on those social media sites. More in that on the next slide. You may want to develop personal gear lists or group gear lists, although on a lot of our trips, that's a very small list. you can write or should consider writing a long description with a lot of details for participants to use during the screening and the subsequent communications. Again, the length of that really depends on the nature of the trip that you're leading. That could be very small also. This is also your first opportunity to address risk management and group dynamics. That can be done by choosing co-leaders and getting support, and also doing some advanced planning, looking at some of the things that we talked about that you might want to consider. If this is a trip that you've not run before, and AMC does allow us to do that, I would not suggest you do it on your first several trips, but you might want to try and talk to other leaders that may have gone in that area, recruit them to come, or do other forms of research to find out what you're getting into. And also, you might want to limit the people that can come on that trip to people that are more qualified than the trip might ordinarily need. On the last slide, or the slide before, I said write a short description for the activity database, Facebook, and Meetup. I want to focus on social media just for a minute. And there, I would consider limiting the information you post on social media. The tendency sometimes on social media is if you give them enough information, they'll just show up. They won't even sign up or tell you they're coming. And that becomes a problem for us because we can't allow them on our trip if they haven't registered and filled out the liability release form. And right now, and probably for a while, that's online. So it's not going to be able to be done at the put-in. You can still post details about the trip, such as the equipment needed, the difficulty, and fitness level, and so on. And those actually help in the screening process. Somebody may read those descriptions and decide that the trip actually isn't for them. Again, I would be careful about putting details about what time you're going to meet, where you're going to meet, and exactly where the run is going to take place, although in some cases it's very obvious from the title. In the Active B, you might want to also limit the amount of details. Again, posting a lot of details, but maybe not giving them all the information on the show up in time and exactly where, and making that more general to push them to have to contact you and register. And then if you accept them on the trip, you can then send them more details about the exact location you're going to be meeting. As I said, posting the trip can be part of screening. If you put in some information, people just reading that may realize that this isn't really the kind of trip that they want, or they don't have the equipment or the experience to do that kind of trip. So some of the things that you might do, here's some examples. This wouldn't be all of the write-up, but it might have a sentence or two like this, where saying, for example, on the second one, this flat water trip will be over 7 miles. All boats must be over 12 feet long. I actually used that all boats over 12 feet long on a tidal trip that I ran because I wanted to eliminate virtually all of the recreational boats that people might buy at a sporting goods store that are very short and would not be able to keep up with the boats that I know are going to be there, that are going to be 14, 15, and maybe even longer, that will be able to move much more easily. That's not to say that some paddlers wouldn't be able to paddle a small boat fast enough, but most wouldn't. I've seen other trips in the ocean where they've said you got to have a bulkhead front, bow, and stern. You must wear a spray skirt. You got to be experienced in the ocean, and that experience has to be recent. All of this will help to assess whether the person is capable of going, And you would follow up on these during the screening process. Sometimes saying things like, this advanced whitewater trip is at the Class 3 level, prior whitewater experience required. That may eliminate some people right off the top. There are a lot of people who like to stick to Class 2 that do have whitewater experience, but they enjoy Class 2 better than Class 3 or higher. And then I've done this one too, where this introductory flatwater trip is on a pond, no experience is needed, and some rental equipment is available. So this is kind of opening it up to a lot of people that otherwise might not be able to go on trips like this. As I mentioned, try to have a co-leader and work out as a team what roles or what tasks the co-leader is going to do, what roles you as the leader are going to do. Try to work with them and realize that may have to change as things go on. You also may need to consider whether you're going to have to break the group up into smaller groups. If you're on a small stream or river, you may need to break it up, and then you're going to need to plan on having river leads and a sweep, or a river lead and a river sweep in each group. If you're splitting into two groups, it might be where you take one group and the co-lead takes the other group. I've had trips with a lot of people on them, on a big all-day trip, where I broke it up into 5 groups actually, and each group had, as it turned out, had a qualified leader in that group, but that is not a requirement of the Appalachian Mountain Club. They do have to be competent, but they don't have to be formal leaders. I mentioned earlier about rentals, and it's really up to you if you want to address rentals at all. It can be very simple from the leader point of view. If rentals are allowed, the way this would work is a potential participant would register for the trip on the AMCNH DB. Then, after you've screened them, if you've accepted them on the trip, it's still contingent on them getting a boat. And to do that, they need to contact the equipment share and reserve a boat and arrange payment. And the participants are responsible for picking up the boat, returning the boat, paying for the boat, unless you as the leader decide that you want to help. In some cases, you may be closer and may say, well, I have room on my rack, so I'll bring the boat for the person. But that's up to you. I would not post that you're not allowing rentals on this trip unless there's a very good reason to do that, because there are a lot of people that are very good paddlers, but they just don't happen to have the particular type of boat that they would need for that trip. Charging. Most of our trips are free, so there's no need to charge. But there are times when we do charge for things, particularly when we're teaching schools. But if you are going to charge, contact the chapter paddlers, co-chairs, to find out what the rules are at this time, because they have changed from time to time. But in general, you want to avoid collecting money in your name. Don't have them write a check to you. If they're going to write a check, find out from the paddlers group what the name of our checking account is and have them write it to that. If you do collect physical money, you need to be sure that you keep track of that and get that into the paddling treasurer so that it can be deposited, and you should work with the paddling treasurer to determine how best to do that. Again, most of our trips we don't charge for anything, so there's no need to be collecting money. And at times we do have a credit card pay system available, so that would simplify things greatly. That completes this video. If you have any questions or comments, please send an email to paddling-leadership@amcnh.org. Thanks for watching.